are listening to Stories from Palestine podcast, a podcast recorded in Palestine and about Palestine. My name is Crystal. I am originally from the Netherlands and I am married to a Palestinian. We live in Beit Safafa between Jerusalem and Bethlehem, and we run Singer Cafe and Al Jisr Bar in Beit Sahur. Before moving to Palestine in 2013, I worked as a teacher and tour guide in the Netherlands. I have a degree in history and in tour guiding and many years of tour guiding experience. Due to the COVID pandemic, tourism in Palestine came to a complete halt, and that's why I started Stories from Palestine podcast in August 2020. This is the second year of the podcast, with every week on Monday a new episode about the history and heritage of Palestine, as well as the reality of life today. I hope you will enjoy today's episode. I'm talking tonight to Diana Al-Shaer, who actually interviewed me for her podcast Dialogue last week. And it was published and uploaded, and I listened to it, and it was an amazing conversation we had. And then I said, why not to talk to you this week for Stories from Palestine podcast, because I think you have also a very interesting story to tell. So Diana, welcome to Stories from Palestine podcast.
Thank you very much, Crystal. And I'm very happy to be in your podcast, and I'm listening to it as well. And it's really great what you're doing. And I'm also happy that you enjoyed our interview.
Yeah, I remember that we were just having this really fun conversation together, and I never felt that I was being recorded or that I was uncomfortable. You're a great host, I have to say. And we know each other through a platform that is called My Olive Roots. It's an initiative by Tania Hourani. She's a Palestinian who's born in Toronto. I think she lives in Abu Dhabi now. And she created this platform to, I quote here now, for the Arab diaspora to share inspirational stories, art, food, and culture, and to strengthen the community. And there are several contributors to her website and her social media, among whom, by the way, also Chef Fadi Katan, who was in Stories from Palestine podcast before in the Christmas edition. And there is a food artist called Omar Sartawi and several other people, and you. And that's how we know about each other. But can you tell the listeners a little bit more about yourself? Because what we know about you is that you are a horse rider and that you are Russian and Palestinian. But who are you?
Right. This is a difficult question.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I would also like to thank Tanya, of course, with My Olive Roots. Thanks for bringing us all together. And talking about me. Well, there are different, let's say, directions now in my life. First of all, I'm international dressage rider. Dressage is the most classical discipline in horseback riding. And I'm currently representing Palestine and competing in different international competitions. I was also one step from qualifying to the Olympics in Tokyo. We were actually qualified before the COVID, but unfortunately my horse got injured. We couldn't go there. But our goal now is World Championships next year, and let's hope, my horse is in a good age. Maybe we seek for the Olympics in Paris now.
Oh.
Yeah, so, and this is one of the directions. And the thing is that, apart from that, I'm also doing sports diplomacy. I'm also representing Palestine at different sports conferences. And now became in charge of dressage discipline in the group in International Equestrian Federation for all the Arab countries. So I will be in charge of developing these sports in our region, let's say. Apart from that, I have also different media projects. One is called MD Horse Concierge. It's something to do with equestrians, with horseback riding. We do different interesting interviews with famous equestrians, and also consult people in purchasing horses or training, and etc., etc. And another, of course, very important, how can I say, it's like my kid.
Yeah.
It's this dialogue that I started, like I started it a year ago when there was this COVID pandemic. As the pre-Olympic qualification was, of course, postponed, I wanted to contribute to our community, and I started to do Zoom interviews with talented Palestinian people around the world. And this was the very start of this journey. And now the dialogue became apart from another project that I started maybe a few months ago. It's called Palirus. I decided to build up a cultural media bridge between Russia and Palestine. And there are many interesting collaborations and projects coming. It's the main focus is on culture. So there are many interesting projects apart from interviews coming now. Yeah, so that, let's say, it's very difficult when people ask me what I'm doing.
Yeah. I can hear you're super busy. I think we should go one by one through your list of things, because they're all super interesting. We know that your mother is Russian and your father is Palestinian. Let's start there. You grew up where? And what did both of these cultures mean to you, and especially in your identity? You know that I have children with a Palestinian husband, so I always wonder about this. We always teach our children that they are not half Dutch and half Palestinian. They are both, because we want them to understand that they are full people, not two halves. So did you grow up feeling half Russian, half Palestinian, or did you grow up feeling that you have something from both cultures?
I would say there was some changes on the way. First of all, I was born in the family of, my grandfather. He was the first Palestinian ambassador in Soviet Union. This is how my Palestinian family got to Soviet Union. And that's why my father, he's still in Russia. He stayed there. So my father was the second Palestinian ambassador after my grandfather in Soviet Union. And of course, there he met my mother. And when I was born, I was actually surrounded by many diplomats. And that's why my youth was very international, even though Russia still had an iron wall, but still, of course, I knew all the children of diplomats. So I was actually very cosmopolitan from the beginning on. And then I was growing up in Soviet Union, then in Russia. But I started to feel a very strong connection at the age of 25 or something like this. And it's very interesting because when I interview other people, I got to know that there are so many Palestinian young people that were growing up in different countries, and we all nearly at the same age come back to our roots. This is very interesting. This is like an inner calling inside. I started to meet a lot of Palestinian people in different countries. I started to listen more to also different kind of podcasts, or started to get more and more interested in it. And it was just like an inner calling. So I think like when I was 25, I started to feel more and more Palestinian. I started to feel like I want to contribute and I really want to do something for Palestine. And then I visited Palestine. So that was a big turning point for me.
Oh, so you never visited Palestine before with your parents?
No, unfortunately not, because our family was somehow spread around the world. You know what happens to many Palestinians, of course. And some of my family live in UAE, in Kuwait, in the States. Some stayed in Russia. Some are in Jordan. So we don't really have many people left in Palestine.
Where are they originally from? Where was your grandfather from?
My grandparents were from Jaffa. And then my father was born in Bethlehem. So this is like the main spots we had, let's say, in Palestine. Yeah. And unfortunately, because, of course, knowing that my grandfather was ambassador, my father as well, so they were kind of involved in diplomacy and politics. I was like, for some time, I was not sure how should I better go there, from which side, and let's say not to have any problems. But it was like my inner decision, and I said, okay, I really want to go. And I was actually going alone, not with my parents. I was flying to Palestine alone.
Wow. And did you fly to Tel Aviv, or did you come from Amman?
No, I was advised to fly to Tel Aviv because I have Russian passport, but I was in the airport for 11 hours.
Wow.
Just So I think that it doesn't matter if I have Russian passport. Of course, they knew like everything about my family, and I had, like, I think most of Palestinians, go through that all their life. And I expected that it's going to be something like this, but I didn't expect that it's going to be, well, let's say that I'm going to get so many hours there, and of course, some questions that I was asked were quite of like trying to provoke me, but I just stayed very calm and I just wanted to get there, and I thought this is my right to visit the place where my family come from.
Yeah.
And that it was, of course, a little bit like shocking for when you are passing through that first time. It is kind of shocking you because I know that it exists. I know about that. But, when you leave abroad, you don't really realize it until you feel it, until you come there and you go through all the checkpoints and you really feel this. And that was changing completely my perception and the way I was thinking. And it gave me even more motivation to do something for Palestine. And that time I was still competing for Russia, but then after this trip, I said that I really want to represent Palestine in sports as well.
Yeah. Before we get to that, how that happened, when you were in Palestine, which places did you visit and how did you feel coming to Palestine, hearing so much about it, knowing so much about it after so many years?
It was interesting because I remember that it was like really late evening when they finally let me in. And I remember that I got in. First, I drove to Ramallah and it was really late. And I mean, there were people waiting for me there and they were like expecting me to come. And they were so welcoming and so warm. And honestly, I came in also with a smile, and they said it was really funny because they said, okay, you are smiling after this 11 hours, so you're a real Palestinian.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I really felt home. It was my dream to visit Palestine, and it was a very warm feeling. And talking about places I visited, I was mostly in the West Bank. And then I went to, after Ramallah, I went to Jericho because, as you know, there are mostly all the equestrian facilities like stables. And then I visited Bethlehem. So, and then I went to Jerusalem as well. So these are the, like this is what I could see. I was only 5 days. It's not a really long
not enough.
time. No. But I really hope that in the nearest future, I will visit again.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, there's so much to explore. Listen, you say about Jericho. I was wondering about that. What do we have in Palestine? I know that where I live, close by in Beit Sahur, there is a small place with horses where children can go horseback riding. And I know about a place in Jericho, but what level are they? Like, how is the horse riding sports developed in Palestine?
I know that there were 2 clubs actually in Jericho, but I think now there is only one. If I'm not mistaken, one was closed. And talking about the level, okay, there are not so many riders in my discipline in dressage. There are mostly jumping riders. Of course, they have a lot of limitations and they can't really travel, and it's a little bit difficult. They have to build up something in their own world. So you can't say that there are riders of international level. No, but there are some really talented young riders. Sometimes they're competing in different international competitions. For example, where they come and they're given the horse to jump, something like this. And I know that there is one very talented girl, for example, Leila Malki. She's really promising, and I really hope that she will be successful. She's already successful on her level, but I think she will grow and she will be successful on the senior level as well. There are some other riders. I mean, of course, it is challenging. And talking about our sports, it's unfortunately a very expensive sport. That's also something that doesn't make it easy, So one thing is to get a horse. Another thing is to travel to, if you want to be an international rider on the international competitions. It needs support, and I think it needs sponsorship, and that's why the sport is mostly developed in the most developed countries in Europe, like Germany or, Netherlands. But I mean, I was still surprised to see so many incredibly motivated riders. And you know, in general, what surprised me in Palestine is, even though you see all this hardship that people go through, but I saw so many optimistic faces. You
Yeah.
know, and
Yeah.
this is something that gives you incredible strengths. When I came back to Europe, I realized that people sometimes create problems where they don't have problems.
Yeah.
And people who live and have to go through all these challenges every day, they know how to enjoy every day of their life. This is something that makes you really wake up and to realize how people live sometimes in European countries, and they just don't appreciate that they have freedom,
Yeah.
that they can travel without any borders from country to country, and they think it's normal. And then they say, okay, I don't know, I'm burnout or this or this. I of course I know it exists. There is burnout and depression, and yes, but very often in developed countries, people create problems where they don't have problems, you know?
Yeah. If you compare sometimes between what people are not able to do here and all the things that people are able to do in the West, then you just wonder, how is it possible that Palestinians can still be so resilient and that they can be so positive?
Yeah.
How did that happen? That, because I can imagine that after you've been here and when they asked you that, do you want to come out to ride for or to do dressage for Palestine? But how did that happen? How did it make you feel? And after you took that decision, how did your environment respond to that?
It was very interesting because I think around 8 years ago, or maybe 9 years ago first, there was a German friend of mine who is also a rider, Christian Zimmermann. He's a talented rider, but of course, being in German team is mission impossible because Germany is the strongest team in the world in our discipline. And he asked if it's possible to represent Palestine because his goal was to go to the Olympics. And then I started to ask around, and then I spoke with the Olympic committee. And then I said, Christian, if you are ready to contribute, because he has a big marketing company in Germany and he could help some students and etc., etc. And he said, of course, I want to give something in return. And then I helped him to get sports nationality, and he was representing Palestine at the Olympics in China, in you know, this Olympics that were in Peking.
But he was a complete German with no Palestinian background?
No Palestinian background, but it's actually normal. It happens a lot in the Olympic sports when someone wants to represent country, for example, and they just have to go through certain procedure to prove that either they can work or do something for the country, you know, or either they live in the country. It is possible to compete for another country where you're not, let's say, not your first nationality, you know, but you have to go through certain procedure.
So he chose Palestine because he thought that this will give him the opportunity to compete in the Olympics. But do you think that this also made him a special connection to Palestine? Did he become more interested to know more about the country?
For sure, for sure. That's what I liked in him, because I knew that he is a person that's not going to just do it for his ambition, but he also invited some students to Germany and he visited Palestine. And for me, it was important to have another foreigner to know more about Palestine, you know?
Yeah.
And also this person has a company, he meets a lot of other people, so he can also give more information. So I think that was actually a very positive step, because at the end there was Palestinian flag being represented at the Olympics.
Yeah.
You know, he, the foreigner was like ambassador, you know, of solidarity with Palestine. So I think that couldn't go wrong, you know.
Yeah.
So it was my like first step, because I was competing for Russia that time. I was in the team, and it was not a good time for me to leave Russian team, because I was like number one that time. So, you know, it was not the right timing. And then a few years later, former president of Palestinian Equestrian Federation contacted me and he said, Diana, and when are you going to represent Palestine? We are waiting for you. And then I said, yes, okay, I really would love to. And then he said, come on, you should come and visit. And then I came over, I visited Palestine, and I was already, before my flight, I was already, of course, sure that I'm going to change my sports nationality. It was a very good time, because also I think I gave everything I could to the Russian Federation, so I didn't have a bad feeling to leave them, let's say. I still help whenever it's something needed. I mean, I always also help to the Russian Equestrian Federation. You know, this is how it started. And then when I changed my sports nationality, the reaction was very positive. I mean, because of course my family was happy. My father was extremely happy. He never asked me to do it. So it was my decision. For him, it was really, really nice. And yeah, so I think I never felt like, even though I was training that time in Germany, now I'm in Netherlands, and actually always when people see me and they see that I represent Palestine, they ask me some questions. So this is also a good way to raise the awareness and to speak to people.
Yeah, it seems like it's a tool for advocacy that you are using for awareness raising. And in the same time, you can make your people proud. So you were preparing this year for the Olympics and then your horse couldn't do it.
Yeah, unfortunately, because at the moment I have one horse, you know, as there are different projects now, and you know, also like having one horse and being in Europe, this is already something that is costing a lot. So of course now I'm not in the position to get many more horses. And with one horse, you always have like a one chance, because they are very big, but they're also very fragile. So my biggest goal is now to keep my horse fit, that she can compete. It's a mare, so it's a girl.
Okay. Yeah.
That she can compete at World Equestrian Games next year. And let's hope also for the Olympics. She's still in a good age. The next Olympics are in 3 years. We keep on going. You know, this is always like this in our sports. It's like a lottery, because it not always depends only on you. You have a life partner. And yeah, this is like this. But we stay positive.
Exactly. You have to continue doing that. And yeah, you say you live in Holland, and most of my podcast listeners know that I am from Holland.
You have to say Netherlands now.
yeah, Netherlands. And actually, you know, I was a tour guide before in Netherlands, and I used to explain people that there's 2 provinces out of 12 provinces of the Netherlands that are called North and South Holland. And that's where the capital is, Amsterdam, and The Hague, which is the place where the government is located. So people always used to focus only on those 2 provinces that are the most important ones, maybe in the sense of trade, commerce, and the government. But yeah, the country has 12 provinces, and all of them together are the Netherlands. You are right. You are very much integrated. Very well. But you live there because of what? Because you can, because of the training, or the situation is better there?
Yeah, because of the training. Actually, Germany and Netherlands are the 2 best countries in Europe where most of international Olympic and national teams are based, because all the best trainers are here. My former trainer was in Germany, and like 1.5 years ago, I changed the trainer, and my trainer now, she's Danish, but she's based in Den Hout, close to Breda in Netherlands. And this is how I actually got here. And now also my fiancé, he's also living in Amsterdam. That's why I actually came here only for Paralympics. I didn't expect staying here longer, but now I stay here longer.
Yeah. You never know where your path will bring you.
Yeah.
You are a sports diplomat. What does that mean?
A sports diplomat is the person that is representing countries or committees in different international sports structures or institutions. For example, IOC, International Olympic Committee, or International Equestrian Federation. So it's called FEI. And it started, I think, 7 years ago. I was invited by my friend to become a co-chairman of Sports Council of the organization that is called Eurasian People's Assembly. So this is a little bit like, organization that has its goal to unite people of Eurasia. So this is the whole continent, Europe and Asia. So we had different kind of sports projects in order to bring people together. And when I was in Russia, I was organizing different sports competitions. That's why I had experience in, organizing events. And somehow then, after this, also Palestinian Equestrian Federation asked me to represent them in a General Assembly in Tokyo for International Equestrian Federation. So because of course for them it's very difficult to travel sometimes, and I'm based in Europe, for me it's easier, I speak the languages. Somehow it started slowly to develop in this direction. This year was actually for me very active because I was also invited to become the president of International Association for Equestrian Amateurs, so people that love horses and love the disciplines. And as I already mentioned, I became in charge of this discipline, dressage, in regional group in International Equestrian Federation. So it means that I'm now in charge for mostly all Arab countries to develop this discipline, because this is a new discipline. Dressage is when the horse is, it's very classical. It's, when the horse is more or less dancing under the rider. It's something that, yes, it's not like in Arab countries before, it was mostly races or endurance or jumping, something a little bit more emotional. But dressage is something very classical, and before it was more popular in European countries, but now it's getting more and more popular also in Arab countries. Many women start to be engaged with that. So it was actually more and more pushing me in this development. So it's interesting because in my family there were 2 ambassadors, but I somehow became ambassador in sports.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's in the genes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I love it. I love it because sports, unfortunately, you can't say that sports is, that it's not political. It is political, especially if we see the Olympics and the history of it. There were always some kind of manipulations, or, there were always kind of people boycotting Olympics. So you see that sports is still, unfortunately, is being used as a tool. And often when you come to this kind of international institutions, sports institutions, you still see that sports is not completely clean from politics, because politics plays a certain role. But what I love in sports, that I think this is a very positive and very powerful tool to bring people together.
Yeah.
And I think this is a very powerful tool of diplomacy. Public diplomacy. And actually this term sports diplomacy was not really well known before, but now there are special departments in different universities that is teaching people sports diplomacy, because now it is proved that this is one of the most powerful tools for public diplomacy that should be used. And I think this is something that can really bring people together. And this I like.
Wow. Yeah, that's very interesting. And also, when you were just describing about how the horse riding in Europe, maybe especially in Russia, I don't know, compared to the Arab world, I made immediately the connection with a video I saw recently. And this is also by a new project that you are involved in, of how you were bringing together a Palestinian dabka dancer and Russian ballet. And this is the same. It's where you are kind of combining the same sports, which is dance, but from 2 different parts of the world, and trying to find where there is overlap, where there is difference, and how does that communicate together. So can you tell a little bit about that?
Yes, that was really interesting. I got this idea already a year ago. I really love Russian ballet, and I also really like dabka. And when I decided to create Palirus, this cultural media bridge between Russia and Palestine, I immediately had this kind of a visual picture in my mind. I even had a dream. It's interesting because like a year ago, I had a dream with a similar, like I saw the ballet dancer and I saw the dabka. So it was maybe not all the picture together. But then one day I was just like talking to my team. I have in Russia very talented people doing videography. And they helped me with my former projects with equestrian, with some horse, we did some horse videos and interviews. And then I told them, I really would love to bring together dabke and ballet. And then my very close friend, she's ballerina from the Bolshoi Theater. Well, I spoke with her. And then the goal was to find Palestinian dabke dancers in Russia. And then through Instagram, we saw Mohammed. There is a guy who created a little dabke group just of Palestinian students studying in Russia. And they all are based in different towns, but sometimes they come together, they're friends, and they dance dabke in different cultural events. Some of them are studying IT, some of them are doctors, some of them are studying engineering or business administration. Then we just it was very difficult because we had to kind of do the rehearsal, but they're all in different cities, and Russia is big.
Yeah.
So you have to take a flight. We had some rehearsals by Zoom. And then they came to Moscow one day before the video shooting. And then they had only one evening to do this rehearsal with a ballet dancer. And she's professional because she's from the Bolshoi Theater. This is the most famous ballet theater, one of the most famous in the world.
Yeah.
And it was really challenging for the guys because it was so many hours of shooting. But at the end, we were all so happy. And you know what made me really happy? That my team, these are like Russian young people that never knew about Palestine. And they really fell in love with these Palestinian guys. By the way, Palestinian students, they speak perfectly Russian. I was impressed how they managed in like 4 or 5 years to fluently speak Russian, nearly without no accent.
Wow.
And it was such a great synergy, like just like in one evening, we became like a big family. And I also see the result now that we posted this video. We have so many views. Also, the guy that did editing, he's Russian, and his friends start to ask him about Palestine. And they say, we never knew that there is Dapke and this and that. And I think, this is my biggest goal now. I love culture and I love sports. And I think this Palirus, it's more focused on culture. This is also building up bridges, and sports is also something that is building up bridges. And I think this is what I love to do in my life in general. Since I was a kid, I love to bring people together. I always brought all my friends together, introduced them. And now these two projects for me and these two directions is like really something what I do with my heart. It's just using those like culture and sports in order to bring people together, in order to raise the awareness and just to start the conversation. And I think this is so important.
And I think that this brings us back as a circle to the beginning of our conversation when I said that you have interviewed me for your podcast and it's called Dialogue. And these conversations that you're having, it's also dialogue, but in many ways you are doing that. You are doing that through sports and through culture, but also by talking to people and giving them a platform to tell about their experiences. So I want to finish off this podcast recording with asking you about dialogue. How did you come up with that idea? You are full of ideas. Who did you interview so far? Who are your guests? What are the topics?
I came to this idea when the corona pandemic started, because in general, I'm a very active person. And it's, for me, the hardest time is when there is no activity. And of course, COVID is something what was very challenging for many people who are used to be active. And then, my horse got injured, this pre-Olympics, the Olympics were postponed. So of course, I'm not the person that gets frustrated, but my energy level was very low at that moment because, with pre-Olympics, you really invest so much time and focus to be there. And then when something doesn't work, you feel that you have no energy. And then, as I mentioned before, I wanted to contribute something to the community. And as Palestine is something like really moving me at the moment, I don't know how to explain it, but this is like an inner calling, maybe from my roots. And I just felt like already many years ago, I was feeling like doing something, either creating a book about talented Palestinians around the world, or either doing a video or something like this. And then I'm very grateful to my fiancé because he just said, don't worry, don't wait, just try it with a Zoom. Just start. I had no clue how to start. I didn't know people. I didn't know the community that time. But I just started slowly with Instagram, to do my research. And then somehow I knew one of the riders that was from Jericho, Mohammed Abu Zaina. Big thanks to him because he was actually telling me, come on, I'm ready to be the first one that you can interview. And then he introduced me to some interesting people. I think my first interview was with Dalal Arekat. So she's a professor and she also known in the community. And so through her, I got to know some more people. Then it was the family of Shami also, and then Sally Shami, and she has a beautiful brand, Salam. And so, slowly through people, it started to grow this network. So through Instagram, then I met Tanya, my olive roots. Of course, she introduced me also, Omar Sartawi, you. And so it was really great. Then, there is already a long list of people I actually interviewed, definitely less than you. but still, I was very happy because, nobody knew me. And I can say that till now, there was no any time I got no, actually, so I was very lucky because people are supporting, even though I'm not a professional journalist, even though I studied international journalism, but long time ago. But somehow this network is growing, and I just started with Zoom using one more camera because I decided that somehow you want to try to entertain people a little bit. So like with using different angles. Of course, I did my mistakes because, I started to tell sometimes the sound was not good enough, sometimes the picture, but this is like learning by doing.
Yeah.
My biggest goal now, of course, as a next step to start doing live interviews. And I hope that, now I know some people more or less in the community. Of course, this is something that needs more investment, but I travel a lot and I try to use this possibility now when I'm in one country and I know that there is someone. Then I can interview because now I can interview myself.
Oh, yeah.
I did some videography myself, so I have all the equipment. And talking about the name, it was very funny. The dialogue, it came to my mind also one of the evenings because I thought about, as you know, YouTube is unfortunately very challenging for people that are using Palestinian topic. For example, our interview that we did is constantly being blocked in promotion. I can't promote it.
Oh, really?
And this happens with majority of my dialogues. If people mention Palestine, occupation, or like, for example, I did interview with Palestinian designer that lives in New York, Rami Kashau. He was just mentioning that he was growing in occupied Palestine. And the rest of the interview, we were talking about him being in Project Runway, about his fashion career. And my interview gets always blocked. We can't promote it. We can't use Google Ads, nothing. Because they say that it is sensitive content.
Wow.
Just because people use the word occupation or Palestine. This is crazy. So it's very difficult. And I already accepted that we will not have many views because we are censored. And for example, you can see that our interview also it has some views, but it is being censored. So not everybody can still see it, not all the regions. So it's very complicated to really promote something that has to do with Palestine, even if it's not very political, on YouTube. Talking about the name, I knew that I'm not allowed to use Palestine in the title because otherwise it's going to be always difficult and it's going to be always challenges in promoting this channel. Then I was thinking, okay, maybe I should use some letters from my name and my surname. And then I was thinking, okay, Diana, it's D-I, and then, A-L is the first two letters of my surname because I'm Shaer. And then it was like D... And then it was D-Al, and then I was, dialogue. So it was really interesting because this is actually really true that dialogue is what I'm doing in these interviews and in general in all the projects. But this is also my first and beginning of my first name and surname. So it was actually a funny combination.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. That's so cool. So people can go to YouTube and they can find dialogues there, but they can also listen on podcast players, right? Do you know which ones? Because I listen to your dialogues on Spotify.
Yes, I have to continue that because somehow I had also challenges with downloading on Spotify. It was something with region. Sometimes they have some strange settings there. I have to continue downloading them because I think since last 4 months I didn't download on Spotify, but I will definitely continue doing that, and I hope that in 2 weeks it's going to be again available and new episodes will be available on Spotify.
Yeah, because I know that a lot of podcast listeners, they use their fixed podcasts like the players like Spotify or Google Podcasts or Stitcher or Apple Podcasts. And people are searching these days, they are searching more and more on words. So if they know that there is something going on about Palestine, you can put that in the theme words and then it probably would pop up. But I will definitely leave some links in the show notes of this podcast so that people who want to hear the dialogues can go there and listen to them and can listen to our other episode. If you enjoyed this one, listening to the stories of Diana, then you can go and listen to the stories we talked about, the Stories from Palestine podcast in my life on your dialogues.
Yeah.
And then I want to thank you very much for taking the time tonight in the weekend to speak a little bit about yourself. And I find it so inspiring how many different things you've managed to set up. And I truly hope that in the future you will be able to come out for Palestine and win some golden medals.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Crystal. It was really a pleasure talking to you. And also thank you so much for what you are doing, because especially as a foreigner coming to Palestine, I think you're a great ambassador as well. Really, thank you so much for what you are doing for Palestine. And I wish you all the best luck. And also, I'm a big supporter of your podcast. And I hope it's going to grow and grow and grow.
I agree. We will keep doing it and keep going on the conversations.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Stories from Palestine. If you enjoy the podcast, then here are several things you can do to support the show. Tell your friends about the podcast. Share some of the social media posts on Instagram or Facebook. Start following the YouTube channel. You can also hear the podcast audio there. And soon I will start uploading videos. Sign up for the email list so that you get a reminder with a clickable link to the new podcast episode. And in the future, you will be updated about programs and trips that I will start to organize. And of course, you can donate to help me pay for hosting the podcast and the website and all the related recording costs. It's the only source of income I have at the moment, so you can imagine how much I appreciate every cup of coffee or falafel sandwich that you buy me on the Ko-fi platform. All the links that you need can be found in the show notes and on the website storiesfrompalestine.info. That's it. I hope you will tune in again next week.